Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Microsoft Surface Go on the left and the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3 on the right. Now, these are two very different yet similar tablets, and I say that because form factor is similar, pricing nearly identical. $550 for the upper echelon of the Surface Go, which has a 128 gig NVMe drive for internal storage, 8 gigs of RAM, and an Intel Pentium Gold CPU, dual-core chip. Of course, very, very low voltage. And then we have a Qualcomm-driven Android OS-based tablet, Super AMOLED display, of course, better battery life. It is running a mobile operating system. It does not have the ability to run Windows 10 like the Surface Go out of the box, even though the Surface Go out of the box will be running Windows S mode, which is their tablet version, but you can opt into full Windows 10 as I have. After all, that's what really differentiates the Surface Go, in my opinion, from every other tablet on the market, and that's why it took so long for Microsoft to come back. Now, the first thing you're probably noticing here is, well, two things. Hurricane Florence, which thankfully I'm not evacuating as a result of, and my wishes go out to all of those who are in the path of this storm. I'm still in the path, but not really. And I know what it is, so I feel the pain. And everybody, just please stay safe, be smart, save your life, okay? If you can, please do. Moving beyond that, screen quality. That had to be the first thing you saw. Both are at max brightness, but look at the difference that you're getting with the Super AMOLED display as opposed to the display in the Surface Go. Now, both of these have impeccable build quality, but for a tablet, first and foremost, for me, screen quality, of course, is always one of the most important things. Now, granted, the Tab S3 has a 9.7-inch display, whereas the Surface Go has a 10-inch display. Keep in mind the resolution is higher in the Tab S3. You're looking at 1536 by 2048, whereas you're looking at 1800 by 1200 in the Surface Go. So that's 264 ppi versus a whopping 216. They're pretty close, but who cares about PPI? Look at the difference between having a Super AMOLED and not. So that's where things start. Now, in terms of what's under the hood, very simple. You're talking about 32 gigs of internal storage here. The $400 base model of this tablet will give you or afford you 64 gigs of internal storage. It will not be that faster NVMe drive, though. It will be flash-based storage, much like the 32 gigs that you're getting in the, again, Android-driven experience with the Galaxy Tab S3. Both do have pen input. I mentioned this. So here you have to purchase the pen for additional $100. Here it's included. But just as a tablet for consumption purposes, I'm going to stick to that because, of course, there are other elements that I'll, touch on. I really want this to be purely a tablet perspective. So in terms of cameras, Samsung has the edge, 13 megapixels on the rear. You've got 8 and 8 on the front and the back of the Surface Go. In terms of other things you should be aware of, the actual weight is less, of course, on the Galaxy Tab. You're looking at a little over 15 ounces versus nearly 18 and a half ounces with the Surface Go. All glass build, construction quality on both sides, which has become Samsung's signature, especially with all of their phones as well, and now the new Tab S4, which I would say is a better comparison to this, but the reality is that, again, there was no leap forward with the Tab S4 other than, in my opinion, the larger screen coming back in the correct aspect ratio. Moving away from Apple's iPad ratio, aspect ratio, excuse me. See what I did there? That's what Apple does to you. So in terms of processors, quad-core mobile processor, a Snapdragon 820 on the right in the Galaxy Tab S3, whereas you've got that Pentium Gold 4415Y, whether you're going with the base $400 model or the more expensive $550 model we're looking at here. Adreno 530 GPU here, Intel's integrated HD 615, which is going to give you a lot more gaming capability than the Android based tablet on the right. Now, when it comes to battery life, that's where you realize this is a Windows machine. Love it or hate it. You're not going to see similar runtimes. The Galaxy Tab S3 is going to outlast the Microsoft Surface Go when it comes to pure run. I know I'm just showing you Florence cycling, but that's because, quite frankly, this hurricane is all that has been on my mind for the last 10 days, and for good reason. If, like me, you live in an area that was still maybe in jeopardy. In terms of Wi-Fi connectivity, exactly the same spec. You've got ABGN and, of course, AC dual band capability. USB 3.1, aka Type-C, is on board for both of these, although the Surface Go does have a dedicated magnetic charging system, as well as the Pogo port for the Surface keyboard. Definitely a far better typing experience, more laptop-like experience than what you're going to get with the Tab S3. Apparently, the alert for that Paul Manafort has, it looks like they're reaching a guilty plea deal with Robert Mueller. Congratulations on that. That should be interesting. But I'll leave that for the political channel when that happens. But again, focusing on specifications, your charge time, because this is, again, charging solely from Type-C. If you charge solely from Type-C on the Surface Go, it's going to take longer because the optimized charging pattern here is the actual brick that's included. Another thing to point out, I mentioned just now before the Manafort thing disappeared from the right side, is that with the Surface Go, the keyboard experience is unrivaled. It's just like the Surface Pro. It's the best in the business. So really, this is the tablet to beat all of their tablets in the same way that the Surface Pro is the tablet to replace the laptop. But is it? If you're coming purely from a content consumption standpoint, then I would wager your money is better spent here. You'll have superior battery life. Yes, you will not have access to the world of Windows 10, albeit that will be in a struggling or frustrating fashion, at least as far as I'm concerned. You only have 32 gigs of much slower storage here than you do in the 128 gig Surface Go, but both are expandable via the micro SD card slot that they both share. Now, the construction on this tablet is fantastic. This is, again, the Surface Go. It really mimics all of the Surface Pro models from the past. Micro SD card slot right there. So really no difference when it comes to expandable storage. You've got your Type-C port right there, headphone jack. Speakers on both of these devices are mediocre. They're not fantastic, but they're tablets. Your 8-megapixel camera there. Another thing I want to mention about the video quality when it comes to cameras, that's another thing Samsung has in its favor. With the Samsung, you're looking at the ability... I don't know what just happened. It looks like the Edge tablet. As I'm talking about the speakers, let me get rid of this. But what I was mentioning was, besides speaker performance, was regarding the build quality on the Samsung. So the all-glass construction, I'm not as big a fan of. You've got Pogo ports on the bottom. You have your Type-C charger alongside your headphone jack right there. You have stereo speakers. There are 4 of them, 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. But the speakers are still, they leave a lot to be desired. But 4K video capture out of the camera on here, not something you're going to get. 1080p is where things are left with the Surface Go. So in terms of operating systems, that should be really clear in terms of which one is right for you. On the right, you're living in the same world you are with your phone. Better battery life, better cameras, but that might be all that you really need out of a tablet. If you find yourself needing access to Windows 10, then that's where the Surface Go fills the gap that, yes, there are a few other players, but none with the build quality or reputation of Microsoft. And at the price point, I do think it's a bit much, but the fact that it can be compared to an Android-based tablet that's a year old speaks to 2 things. One, that maybe it is affordable, maybe it's overpriced, depending on really what you think of the Galaxy Tab S4. I do think that's incredibly overpriced at its $650 base. Even if they've improved the storage capacity, we're still looking at very similar performance. Yes, an improved S Pen. Yes, a larger screen. But at the end of the day, the screen, the battery life, and the capability of the Tab S3 have kept me loyal to this product. If the battery life here was better, if we had a Super AMOLED, if Windows 10 didn't seem like torture, then the Surface Go would absolutely be my first choice, which is why I thought it would be a killer product. Unfortunately, it's just a little bit underpowered for what I want. I'm not saying for what everyone else. There are plenty of you out there that will run this in the tablet mode. That might be perfectly fine. But for me personally, the allure was Windows 10, and this product has made it abundantly clear that while it can run Windows 10, you really should stick to tablet mode, which means maybe you should stick to the $400 entry price model, because I'm not sure how much you really gain stepping up in the to the NVMe drive, as well as the 8 gigs of RAM, considering the bottleneck seems to be the CPU, which may have seemed obvious at first, but until I actually put it through its paces, clearly not as obvious. Do remember, this tablet came out in February of 2017, this July 9 of this year. So just putting it out there. Better battery life, better screen, better cameras. Mobile OS is its big pitfall. Inferior typing capability with any compatible, including the Samsung-made keyboard. The reverse over here, inferior camera, inferior screen, but definitely more of a laptop replacement, which is why the Surface Go is such a complex and somewhat confusing product, because had that processor had the little bit extra oomph to really run things like Photoshop properly, to run video editing properly, and I don't mean 720p video editing, I mean 4K, and I know that's asking for a lot. I know my hardware, don't get me wrong, but if they had that, they could command a higher price, and I think people would pay it for portability. No question about it. Still a magnificent job on engineering, design. The processor is where it comes short. But if you need access to a Windows 10 world and you don't want to carry around a Surface Pro, this is the only way to do it. Otherwise, I recommend going for the Surface Pro. But again, if you're purely out for content consumption and battery life, Galaxy Tab S3 is the bargain. And especially coming in to the end of the year holiday sales, you're going to see the price dip on the Tab S3. It's inherent. It already has a little bit. I've seen it go on sale. It's still firm retail $550 right now, but I think that will change. Hopefully this gives you more than enough information to weigh which tablet is right for you. Again, in my opinion, if you're the content consumption human and you don't need Windows 10, stick to a mobile OS-based tablet. You're going to probably be happier. And by the way, I don't even care about this bezel. You noticed I didn't mention it. A lot of people hate the bezel. I think it's comfortable for holding it. And the kickstand is great, but that's not enough with the fact that I have to run Edge. I mean, that I can't run Chrome is just mind-boggling. And that's not the summation of the entire review. It's just a side note. So don't, get all hot and bothered by this. But that rounds things out. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.